I feel as though I should have more P's in my presentation today. But just linking back to Corinne's comment this morning, you said this is inspirational. It felt much more perspirational to me at the time, I have to say. So look, good morning all. It's wonderful to be here with so many like-minded practitioners who care passionately about culture and leadership. As DB said, many of you would know that the higher education sector has been through incredible disruption over the past few years. Some of that disruption will be very visible to you and was very public. International education being disrupted by closed borders during COVID was a very public example. More recently, generative AI and the impact on academic integrity, concerns about cheating, these disruptions have been very visible to you. There were also some real challenges and disruptions that were less visible and that actually predate the pandemic. And so the story that I'm going to share with you today is really around how Macquarie University navigated that disruption and how we sought to transform and adapt our ways of working during that time. And doing so with a really core enabling focus on culture and leadership. And in fact, we did that over the past 4 years in very close partnership with Human Synergistics and Corinne Cantor in particular. And I have to say, I don't think we could have achieved what we did without that partnership. So my acknowledgement and thanks to Corinne and the team. Before I delve into our story, a little bit about Macquarie University. For those of you that don't know Macquarie, we're a large university based in metropolitan Sydney, a research-intensive university. We have over 40,000 students, a range of students from Australia and all around the world. Quite a diverse global mix of students on our campus. We have over 5,000 staff. And a little bit different to other universities in Australia. I mean, in Australia, we all do education and research as our core missions. At Macquarie University, we also have a health enterprise, which is unique in Australia. So for those of you who know Sydney, Macquarie University Hospital is a large hospital in Sydney. We have a series of health clinics. So in addition to running our education and research enterprise during COVID, we also were part of the healthcare response to the pandemic as well. So, where did this journey begin? In 2019, so before COVID hit, we recognised that we had some real challenges with our operating model. And again, some of this would be apparent to you. The underfunding of research in Australia is fairly well known. There are some real challenges around how education is funded, and some changes a few years back to what they call Commonwealth-supported places, which is the number of places and the amount of funding for students in Australia to go to university. That was significantly compressed. And so for all universities, including Macquarie, our operating model came under significant pressure. When our expenses were rising at a higher rate than our revenue because of those funding challenges. Now, clearly, we've heard the word sustainability used many times. That created some real sustainability challenges for us. There is for all, or for most universities in Australia, a strong reliance on international education. And we always knew, again, pre-COVID, that there were some risks associated with that. And we had sought to mitigate those risks by ensuring that we had a diversity of students from different countries around the world, not too much emphasis on one particular region, not too much emphasis on one particular area of study, but nonetheless, we were worried that it was a bubble that could burst. And so this was something very much on our radar. And so we developed an operating plan designed to go from 2020 to 2024, which really sought to tackle some of these challenges, and it had a strong transformation agenda. Everything from how we organised our academic faculties and trying to rethink that. At that stage, no academic job loss, purely reorganising and rethinking about our academic mission. And then we had a very clear remit to redesign professional services, and there were some efficiency elements there as part of that strategy. So when we think about universities, you often think about the academic and teaching mission and our academic lecturers and researchers. What you may not know is about half of the university is professional staff. So corporate services, support staff, student administrators, and we really wanted to redesign that to put our customers and students at the centre of how we were organising that service delivery, as well as becoming more efficient. So we had a strong transformation agenda. That was not received particularly well in the university, and our organisation went into cultural shock. And perhaps to give you a clear sense of what this looked like, what it felt like, let me share with you a story. So at the end of 2019, as we formulated this operating plan and this transformation agenda, we decided to hold an all-staff town hall, hosted by our Vice-Chancellor, in one of our very large lecture theatres. Imagine something like this holding over 500 people. It was live streamed to 3 other venues around the university campus. And the goal was to be really open and transparent with the challenges that we were facing and how we were proposing to tackle that through our transformation agenda. That town hall did not go according to plan. So you can imagine at one point before the town hall started, we had a range of staff coming in protesting, holding banners, dressed in the colour of their union to show their solidarity and opposition to what was going to be discussed. And we had some student activists manage to get into the main venue pretending that they were staff and then ambush our Vice-Chancellor during question time, not allowing him to speak, attacking him very publicly. To add insult to injury, our new Chancellor had started about 3 weeks beforehand. So this is like the equivalent of the chair of your boards, and had decided to come to this town hall to get a bit of a feel for the place. I've worked at Macquarie for 9 years. I can tell you that was my worst day at the university. And although things like protests and those sorts of things, they're not unusual for a university, this was different. The feeling was really different, and it was a sign of how our organisation was responding. Because universities are very purpose-led, but there's not always that connection to the reality of our operating model and how we actually need to operate to deliver that purpose. So play through, 2020 then hits. And all of these issues are amplified. Our international borders close. That bubble that I said could burst, it burst. All of a sudden, our international students could not come to Australia. And that's not only new commencing students, that's international students who'd gone home for the summer, couldn't get back into the country to complete their study. Universities were one of the only industries that were specifically excluded from JobKeeper, which was really that financial support for casual staff members. We have a lot of casual staff who are not eligible. And so Tanya mentioned those decisions about whether or not to support the workforce. Again, we made that call and made some further financial investment. That also intensified that financial pressure. And so we then did need to consider more significant downsizing for academic staff, and then increasing the level of efficiency required of our professional staff. And in the midst of all of that, we were responding to a pandemic, changing to online teaching, being part of that healthcare response as well. So with that transformation agenda, we went into that with our eyes open to a few things. One is, to this day, the vast majority of transformations fail. The statistics are still about 70% fail. We also knew that our prospects of success would improve if we focused on culture and people and leadership at the same time. So if there are 2 things that I'm grateful for that period, it would be this. One is that we recognise the importance of culture and leadership as a core enabler and a core lever for our success, and that we made a conscious decision to focus on that in order to achieve our strategy, in order to achieve that transformation. And secondly, that we recognised we couldn't do it ourselves. We actually needed some help. And that's where, in partnership with Corinne and Human Synergistics, we brought in some expertise and some assistance that we didn't have within the organisation. And sometimes that's a big call to do that, but fundamentally we knew we needed that help. So what did we do? How did we do it? First of all, we started at the top. We recognised that if we wanted our organisation to transform, we needed to lead that. We've heard about that, leadership from the top. At that point in time, we had a fairly new executive team. We'd had some movement in and out of different executive positions, including a number of new executive deans who lead those faculties, the core academic mission of the university. And it's funny, this picture that you see behind me has been selected very intentionally, because people often talk about changing a university like turning the Titanic. It's actually not. It's like trying to turn a flotilla of ships, because actually there's many subcultures within a university. So the culture that we see in our business school, compared to our faculty of medicine, compared to our IT department, they're quite different. And we recognised early on that as a leadership team, we needed to be really closely aligned and really focus on how we became match fit and worked really together and constructively at that university level. So really thinking about going from, we had a very good leadership team, really high performers, we liked each other, we still do, we worked well together, but were we a high-performing team? And at Macquarie, we do have some advantage in terms of how we're structured, in that those executive deans actually sit on our leadership team. That's not always true of universities. Sometimes they report through what's called a provost. We don't have that model. So we had an opportunity to build that strong collegiality and sense of one university at the very top. And I think we recognised we needed that alignment in what was to come. Because if we were not completely aligned, if we didn't completely back each other, we knew from that town hall, if we didn't do that, we were going to be eaten alive. So some of the tools that we used, LSI was a very powerful tool for us. And you can see here, this is actually from our executive group profile. We had a very good profile. It's a good LSI profile. There's a lot of blue there. There's a lot of constructive there. So we were starting from a really good base. But what we needed to focus on was that sense of how did we tackle some of these big issues together without a sense of cracks showing. Things like, how did we tackle difficult conversations and conflict? And to give one example, in that downsizing that I referenced, we knew strategically that the resource reallocation shouldn't be even across the board. We had good data to tell us that. It would have been easy to say, right, everybody, here's a percentage cut, everybody do that across the board. But we knew strategically that was not the right thing to do. And actually some areas should save less and some should save more. Having those conversations in a leadership team, creating alignment, creating that shared commitment to then take out to the university community, I don't think we could have done it without this kind of work. And for us, it was beyond the LSI tools. It was team coaching, team observation from the human synergistics team. So actually thinking of ourselves as that group coaching, that group dynamic, to really make sure that together we could lead the organisation really well. So, worked on our leadership team, built that really strong alignment, got match fit. We then turned to organisational culture, and that work started with bringing together some of our broader leadership community, and both formal leaders and informal leaders throughout the university for a workshop on, okay, now let's start to think about things like our purpose, our direction, our values, support this strategic transformation work. Those workshops did not go according to plan. Now, there might be a theme coming through here. Things don't go according to plan, so that need for adaptation and continued iteration certainly comes through. So for us, what we found was, because we were going through such drastic change, where people were up to on that change curve was perhaps not where we thought they might be. they were still very much coming to terms with what was quite rapid and drastic change for the university community. And so our realisation was we needed to build trust and shared accountability amongst our broader leadership community, not just the executive group, but the broader leadership community. And so was born our Senior Leaders Forum, which really brings together our leadership community across the university, the direct reports to our executive group. Now, we had tried this before and it hadn't been effective. This time it really stuck, again with some support and assistance from Human Synergistics. So we now meet with that group regularly. Why this time? Was it successful when it hadn't been successful in the past? There was a sense of openness and transparency. We shared with them the outcomes of that workshop and where we thought people might be up to. It was led by the Vice-Chancellor himself, and so that strong connection to the very top was clear. We actually gave our senior leaders a voice in creating the agenda and the key things that they wanted to be part of through a reference group, so a subgroup that worked closely with Corinne and myself to set the agenda for those meetings. And then we heard what they had to say. So one of the things they said was, we would like more clarity on what you expect from us, what role we can play within the organisation. What do you think good leadership looks like? And so we set about developing a leadership framework that answered those questions very much in partnership with that community. You can see here some feedback from that forum, very strong results around engagement, positivity, and how leaders responded to this particular initiative. And then I share with you here, so this was the senior leadership framework that we developed very much in close collaboration with that community, being clear about what does good leadership look like at Macquarie University. Simple statements: we lead with purpose, we lead with care, and that's care for ourselves, for our colleagues, for the organisation, for our students, and we lead for all, which really encapsulates that sense of inclusion and belonging that's so fundamental to, I think, every university, but particularly Macquarie University. And then those constructive behaviours, again, working that through, and this is a tool that we use very much today. It's been embedded in how we recruit, how we develop, our talent and succession planning, our leadership development. Again, through the Senior Leaders Forum, we identify areas where people say, you know what, I'm really comfortable here, I need some more development in these areas, and then that gets built into the Senior Leadership, the Senior Leaders Forum as a sort of continuation of this piece of work. So, where are we now? Look, I'm really pleased to say, I mean, I never think of transformation as having an end point. There is that sense of continuity always, but that big strategy, that very clear transformation agenda that we set at the end of 2019, we've achieved what we set out to achieve. There are very positive indicators of success. I'm not so naive as to think that doesn't require constant vigilance, constant attention. And so it remains a core KPI for me that I'm focused on making sure that that transformation is embedded, that it holds true in implementation, not just on day 1, but day 100, day 400, day 700. So really continuing to watch that with very close measurement and close attention. Our leadership community is engaged, they're positive. We've used that change curve to measure where they're up to now. They're now very much out the other side and in that very constructive mode, which we were hoping to see. And staff morale and engagement is improving. So to give you a sense of this, let me share with you, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we had an all-staff town hall. Virtual this time, not face-to-face. I have learned my lesson in that regard. If there's one thing that's come out of COVID that I like, virtual town halls are excellent. So we had a virtual town hall hosted by the Vice-Chancellor. And one of the jobs that I was asked to do for that town hall was to actually moderate questions. And so anyone could post their questions coming through, and I was then asked to play them back. And we did that during COVID too, actually. We had a number of town halls during this journey. And for a while there were really narky, cynical, difficult questions that were peppered throughout the questions that I would then put to the Vice-Chancellor. I should say too, often verbatim, honestly, to ensure that we weren't sanitising that. In this town hall that we had 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was not one nasty comment. There was not one cynical question. There were still lots of questions. At one point I thought, I better make sure it's working, that they're still coming through, and they were. But to me, it was a real sign of how far we have come as an organisation, that we've achieved what we needed to achieve, and that we've done it in a way where our community has come along with us. So as we think about what's next for Macquarie University, we're currently thinking about our next strategic framework, the next 10 to 15 years. We're doing some more work on our next iteration of the operating plan. So this one went from 2020 to 2024. What happens now for the next 4 or 5 years? We're really doubling down on our values and our organisational culture. Because as I think about what lies ahead, what I do know is this: the higher education sector will continue to be disrupted over the next few years. I think the difference now for Macquarie University, having invested so deeply in our culture and leadership, is that we now feel very capable to adapt to that change. Thank you.